Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we have with us now Larry Johnson, Larry C. Johnson. In fact, he's a former CIA intel analyst, and you can find all of his good works at sonar21.com. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon, and we've got the great Larry Johnson. Larry, tell people where they can find all of your good works online, Folio and X and all that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you for your generous comments. You can follow me at sonar21.com, and it's an honor to be with you, Garland.
Thank you very much. All right, let's get started. We got big things going on today.
You think?
A bit. One of a friend of mine a while back we were discussing, would RFK Jr. get in? Would Tulsi Gabbard get in? And that as I'm sure a lot of people, I was like, well, there's a lot of people in the Trump administration I got issues with, but that ain't two of them, right?
Right.
And particularly, whether or not we discussed, will they get in? He thought they wouldn't, and I said, if they both get in, we got to have a talk, because big changes are afoot, and very powerful people have decided that big changes are afoot. Your thoughts? Let's start with Tulsi Gabbard. What does this mean? You're a former CIA guy. Just for people that don't know, how much power and authority does the DNI person have? And one other thing that I think is important, it's been said many times that Trump listens to the last person in the room, and the DNI person's more often than not the last person in the room. Larry Johnson.
Yeah, there's the power. You put your finger right on it. In terms of being able to control CIA, National Security Agency, Defense Intelligence Agency, the way people talk, they talk about 18 intelligence agencies. Well, the reality is there are only five or six that actually collect intel. Everybody else is a consumer, and they will have their own analytical shops. But you got to go after the ones to do the collection. One of the things, so as a DNI, she doesn't really have a lot of control over those other agencies. However, she does oversee the production of the Presidential Daily Brief. And that means, and I have passed on to her through a second party, that she needs to be the one, like starting tomorrow, she goes down with those briefers. She's the one that delivers the brief.
Oh, wow. So they come to her with the info, and then she goes to Trump and she says, this is, okay. Now, let me ask you this. What happens if, this is something curious, what happens if they try to, buffalo her? She comes down and they there's some, remnants of the neocon, and they give her some, the Russians are fighting with shovels and they've run out of missiles again kind of stuff. What can she do if she feels like she's getting a snow job?
Well, she's got actually some additional levers. One, she can call in and have a round table where the representatives from the different agencies are sitting there at the table and say, okay, you make your presentation and back it up with data.
Okay.
I require them to do that. The other thing she oversees, and it's actually it's called the mission integration. So they're two separate divisions of DNI and mission integration. I just learned that a friend of mine has been nominated for that position. Now, whether it gets, we'll see if that person gets approved by the White House. Hopefully they do. But under that mission integration is also the production of national intelligence estimates, and the National Intelligence Council. That's been missing in action now for the last 4 to 8 years. I don't even recall a significant national intelligence estimate being produced during Trump's time. And those estimates are critical in really laying out a proper assessment. We do have indirect evidence from Trump, as well as from David Ignatius talking to the former CIA director, Bill Burns, that the CIA was lying to Trump. And those lies continue to be passed on to the media that, Russia's economy is staggering. And Russia's suffering catastrophic losses. Nonsense. In fact, Russia reported a 4.1% economic growth for 2024, and IMF and World Bank, not exactly puppets of Putin, reported 3.8, 3.9% respectively. So Russian economy is doing fine. Russia's not suffered massive casualties. And so it's incumbent upon Tulsi to bring some honest integrity to this intelligence process, because they've been so politicized that they were telling the White House what they thought the White House wanted to hear, and not giving the truth. I saw my job. I had my own political views when I joined the CIA in 1985, and you would have classified me as a conservative. But I made it a point that I was not to bring my own political views, feelings, convictions. I had to call it straight. Be like an umpire, and it doesn't matter whether it's your kid at the plate or not. If it's a ball, it's a ball. If it's a strike, it's a strike. Call it fair. And I'm sad to say that I was. I'm not saying I was unique in this regard, but it was not a common trait. There were a lot of other analysts that would shade the truth, and that would create a story that they knew that the White House wanted to hear. So I think that's where I think Tulsi is going to create, force the intelligence to come forth. So one example, we keep hearing Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism. Iran's the greatest sponsor of terrorism. Okay, let's deal with the facts. You go back through the country reports on terrorism, which is presented by State Department, but it's actually generated from data created by the Counterterrorism Center under the DNI. And, that tells a completely different story, particularly over the last 8 years. Only 1 year were 3 groups that were linked to Iran identified in the top 10 of terrorist groups. Well, that was 2023, because they're claiming that every action by Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis was an act of terrorism. Instead, I would argue it was more an act of self-defense, but that's a whole nother issue. But prior to that, all of the vast majority of terrorist attacks that are taking place are backed by Sunni groups that don't have any connection with Iran whatsoever. It's just so she needs to bring some integrity to that process. We need to get out a clear national intelligence estimate that Iran's not trying to produce a nuclear bomb, to defang that argument from the neocons. So there's ways that she can use the intelligence process, use the facts to disarm the lies that predominate in Washington.
Well, let me touch this first, even from a cultural perspective within the CIA. And here's what I mean. My understanding is, in listening to Ray and John Kiriakou and various other people, was that the way to get up was to tell them, the way to climb the ladder was to tell them what they wanted to hear. And that people that they worked with, let's just say, weren't the sharpest knives in the drawer, right? They weren't by any stretch of the imagination the best, but they knew the game, and they'd say what wanted to be here, and up the ladder they would go, which is, a culture of bringing yes men and women to the top, as opposed to the best person you can find to do the job, right? If Tulsi comes in and says, I want the truth, you change the culture to where you get people who say, look, this is, whether you like it or not, this may not align with our policy. Here's what I got. And you change the culture of the whole organization. Your thoughts?
Well, you change it by starting to fire people or reassigning them. Once they realize that there's no career merit in that. And look, I saw that firsthand. We had, when I was the Honduran analyst, we had the Nicaragua branch. And the branch chief for the Nicaragua branch was a guy that we called Bob's Big Boy, because he looked. You remember the Bob's Big Boy with the plastic hair? His nickname is also Plastic Hair. That he looked exactly like the Bob's Big Boy sign. And there was another analyst in the Mexico branch. So I was all in the Central America, Mexico branch, and we called him Special K. Now, what happened was Plastic Head, or Bob's Big Boy, was a devout evangelical Christian and was proselytizing at work. And to the point that if you would go to church with him, you'd get promoted.
Oh, geez.
Hence the name Special K. Special K joined up with him. Now you're thinking, well, so what? That was 1987, 88. What difference does it matter? 9/11. Who is in charge in the Counterterrorism Center of Radical Islam? The analysis. Who's overseeing that? Who's managing that whole thing? That would be Plastic Head. And his deputy was? Come on, Garland, guess. It would be
Special K.
Special K. Okay. That's how the game's played, brother. So I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, we talk about realism when it comes to foreign policy, but realism has they've changed what the word means. To us, the old school literal people, realism means you just tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I say this, one of the things that we were going to talk about is, does Trump have a coherent foreign policy? We're going to go with that one. It's all over. He's a chaotic kind of guy, but here's the thing. It's like when you're traveling, if you have a compass and you stay on true north and you stay on that compass. Yeah. To me, that DNI person, by giving him the truth, look, this is what they're doing. This is who's doing it. This is how many weapons they have. This guy's a terrorist. This guy's, here's the data. It kind of is like a compass where even if Trump's policy is somewhat maybe incoherent and chaotic, there's a certain level of reality that always points you in a direction of a real foreign policy, as opposed to, and this is all we've been doing with the neocons, living off narratives. They create some magical world of magic where all we got to do is wave our magic hand and Putin and his troops will all run away, that crap, and it doesn't work out. So what are your thoughts?
Well, let me go back to when Tulsi was being attacked in her confirmation hearing about, is Edward Snowden a traitor? Yes or no? Is Edward Snowden a traitor? Now, Tulsi missed a great opportunity there, because what she should have said was, Senator, it doesn't matter what I think. I'm not being judged to be appointed to a role where you want to know what my opinion is. My job as Director of National Intelligence is to make sure that the president and the members of the legislature have the best facts available. So to respond to your question in a factual manner, Edward Snowden is not a traitor because he has not been charged with treason. There is no standing indictment against him. So no, he's not a traitor because the United States has chosen not to charge him as such. If the United States chooses to charge him as such, then yes, I can tell you that he is a traitor. But as of today, no, Edward Snowden's not a traitor. That's what you should have said.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Let me ask you this. We think of foreign policy, right? There was issues with COVID. There's other issues that aren't just foreign policy. There's domestic policy. Hey, is the CIA, look, I believe this. God forbid they should start looking at the emails between MSNBC and CNN and the CIA. We know what's the guy's name that was with the LA Times, Ken Delaney, and et cetera.
Yeah, Delaney and then David Ignatius.
Yeah,
Sanger, David Sanger. Yeah, there's
Bash. I mean, we go on and on. Your thoughts on, well, not your thoughts, but what ability or what influence does she have on these kinds of almost unofficial covert operations that happen here in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing she's going to have to get rein in, and hopefully she'll be working with Pam Bondi on that to ensure that the domestic influence operations get shut down. There needs to be some real accountability. So I was told in the late summer of 2016. So one of my CIA buddies, we actually, and this is another story, we were the two who were asked to brief Devin Nunes about the intelligence community, CIA, when he first joined the House Intelligence Committee. And so this buddy of mine, he was the director, the admin director for one of the most top secret parts of the CIA. And he told me in the summer of 2016 that John Brennan had set up a task force in CIA that was now called the Trump Task Force, but previously it was the task force that in the summer of 2015, when it was not clear who the Republican nominee was going to be, and the primary was still underway between the Democrats, that Brennan was collecting intelligence on all the presidential candidates except Hillary, including Bernie Sanders. Yeah. And then when it became clear that Trump was going to be the nominee, it focused in, and the intent was using CIA's assets as part of a coordinated effort with the FBI, with British intelligence, to destroy Trump. So that's one area where she needs to get some accountability. Go back and find out. Make sure every CIA officer is going to get out of politics and is going to do their damn job. Provide information, provide the best intelligence possible, and keep their political opinions at home.
Yeah, the other thing I think is important, and this is where it really gets ugly, where we're going, where you're going, and where we're going now, and that is the whole Russiagate thing. Mm-hmm. There was an incestuous relationship that was between the intelligence, between the New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, et cetera, and members of Congress, Adam Schiff, et cetera, where I think there was an intricate operation going on. That's why, like the January 6th committee and Schiff and all of these people, Biden had to do preemptive pardons, because that they're involved in some really nasty things that can get a lot of them drummed out of Congress. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, so remember, it was like March 4th, March 5th, Donald Trump, back then as a candidate or as a newly elected president in 2017, said, hey, the FBI was spying on me. I went on RT and said, well, it wasn't just the FBI, it was CIA, it was British intelligence. And I had a friend who was still active, who was in a senior position, that was flagging some of what was going on to me. So I then texted Devin Nunes. Now, this was like 3-4 years after I'd first briefed him. So I had a relationship with him, and I said, I need to see you. And I went in and briefed Nunes on, here's what they're spying on Trump. Here's how it's being done. Here's a name you need to talk to. 2 days later, Nunes went to the White House. And if you recall, it was quite a media event when he came out of the White House. The press descended on him, attacking him because he was getting the information. He's getting the briefing. It was that briefing that then he turned it over to Kash Patel to start the investigation. And that's where, I'm taking credit. I initiated that. I started that. But it was Nunes that took it up, Kash Patel that did the dirty work to get it done. And the exposing this corrupt, it wasn't just FBI. It wasn't just CIA. In fact, NSA was involved to an extent, which is why Mike Rogers, who was then the head of the NSA, he went to Trump and said, hey, you need to be aware of what's going on, that you're being spied on. And that's where, and you haven't heard another word from him since. So this is, we had a coup underway in this country, and all of the establishment was part of it, because as we're discovering now, with what's taking place with the whole Doge event. Let's separate out some of Trump's boneheaded moves on the foreign policy front. Exposing this corruption, like I hadn't realized that our good, Princess Liawatha, or Senator Warren, that she's become a multimillionaire while a member of the Senate, making $200,000 a year. That Samantha Powers tripled her net worth up from like $10 million to $30 million while on a government salary. Now, they may be good investors, but nobody's that good. And, same with Nancy Pelosi, made billions. How many Republicans have gotten wealthy the same way? This is not just Democrats. And that's what Trump has come to shake up a little bit, which is why I guarantee you Mitch McConnell has become a wealthy man, despite his, limited government salary. So cleaning this corruption up is just, item number one to go after. That's why they've been trying to destroy Trump, because they realize once if he gets a proper hold of it, the grift is up.
Yeah, and the numbers are astronomical. I mean, when we saw what happened with USAID, now let's face it, we all knew. We all knew what was going on. We knew the whole game. I remember when Tulsi Gabbard, I'll never forget it. Tulsi Gabbard decided to run. And I even use these words. I said the whole machine, like a battleship, bringing all of its guns to the starboard. You know, the captain says, "Bring all guns to starboard," right? And she says, "Oh, I'm running," or whatever. And she like beat up on Kamala Harris one day, right? And the next day, I'm like, look at this. It's like Deutsche Welle. It's The Guardian. Everywhere, the whole machine. Tulsi Gabbard's a Russian. That Tulsi Gabbard's this, and it was what I found remarkable was they all used the same language. Like somebody sent out an email. Like somebody literally wrote the article, sent it out to everybody, and said, "Get it out." And then you had whether it was these, remember the guy with the Hamilton 68 dashboard? All of a sudden he pops up. Hey, we've got all of these Russian accounts saying that Tulsi Gabbard is talking to him or something. The whole machine overnight says, okay, that's it. Tulsi Gabbard's the target.
Yeah. And then to have her put on the watch list by Homeland Security, just it shows how out of control the government got. And unlike Watergate, when you at least had some Republicans who were, had enough integrity to stand up and condemn Richard Nixon, you haven't seen that on the Democrat side, unfortunately, condemning the actions. You can come up with a lot of reasons not to like Donald Trump, but that doesn't mean you violate the Constitution in the process. This ought to be a fair fight, not an unfair fight. And the depth, we knew this was going on, but I think a lot of people are surprised at just how bad it was. Chelsea Clinton getting $84 million.
I probably to some extent, I'm not surprised or shocked. I kind of raise an eyebrow and say, wow, that really was a lot. But if you've been following this thing, particularly Russiagate, you followed the whole Mueller and Andrew Weissman, and you saw all the things going on. A while back, one of the things that I've been saying for a while, when they said, we're going to charge Trump with election interference for 2020, I'm like, wait a minute. The FBI went out and they got a laptop. And they knew the guy called them twice and says, hey, I got Hunter Biden's laptop. He won't come pick it up. He had to call them twice. They come pick it up. They keep it for 10 months. And then just before the election, they contact the social media, the media, and they say, oh, by the way, if somebody tells you that there's a Hunter Biden laptop with bad stuff, Russian interference. Now, they knew it wasn't because they had the laptop. And whether or not they examined it or not, which they probably did, they had a right to do due diligence and examine it, but they deliberately lied. And not only did they say you have to censor it, they said, you have to censor it. We will monitor to make sure that you censor it, and we'll help you censor it. It was the clearest example of election interference that I've seen in my lifetime. And it was specifically by the FBI. And I'm like, and they're charging Trump with election interference?
Yeah. Well, see, I've got a personal tie to John Paul McIsaac, the laptop repairman.
Okay.
Because I've known his father for 25 years. And when the story broke and the JP was identified as the laptop repairman and the media descended on him, his dad, Steve McIsaac, Mac called me up and said, my son's not listening to me. He's going to get himself killed. Would you talk to him? So I finally got through to him, had a three-way call with his dad and JP, and spent 2 hours on the phone. And at the end of that, he realized some of the steps he needed to take to start protecting himself. And I helped. And I actually told he'd been working with Rudy Giuliani, and I could tell I could not say enough bad things about Rudy Giuliani in this case, because when I said call up Rudy's lawyer and tell him you need a lawyer, and when he called Rudy's lawyer, the lawyer goes, "Why do you need a lawyer? Good God! Helen Keller could see why JP needed a lawyer. So the kid was off on his own, but everything he did throughout that process was when he realized that the FBI was not providing the information and was sitting on it, that's when he took other steps to get it public. And then those 51 so-called intelligence agents, and some are pretty senior people. One of them was a classmate of mine. When I went through the career trainee program it started in September of *85, Steve Hall, he was in my class. He was just a 22-year-old kid fresh out of college. He was one of the friends and family hires at CIA because his daddy had worked there. That's how he got in. So, and for him to sign on to something like this, again, just shows the lack of integrity, lack of character.
Well, and Ray, I talked with Ray, and he was saying that he knew a person and that he talked to him at that time. And he says, hey, why are you putting your name on this thing? And the person basically said, Trump's such a threat, I'll do anything to stop him. And I thought, yeah, anything, including risk your hide, buddy. Anything, and said, including putting your neck in a rope, because because that's what you've done. You just hanged yourself. Whenever you say I'll do anything, that certainly means that you are creating a liability. And are you willing to give up your freedom? Are you willing to give up your finances? Are you willing to give up your liberty? Everything, because you might end up in jail. And I told Ray the story. I said when I first got promoted to major in law enforcement, they had 106 people under me, and I had this big regional meeting. And I said, look, guys, if you're right, I got you 100%. I'm back. Yeah, you're within the law. I said, but I ain't going to hang for you.
Yeah.
If you do something and you did something, we make human errors, but I'm not going to put my neck on the line and hang for you when you're wrong. If you're wrong, I can't help you. Right. Same for me. If I do something and I'm wrong, I ain't going to ask you to hang for me. Right.
Just accountability. Accountability is what you're talking about.
Yeah. So let's go with again, another big story today. Well, we've been getting this. Well, Trump talked to Putin. Well, the Russians are like, yeah, well, maybe we didn't. We did. Trump, yeah, we did. We're hearing all this. So today, and I was fortunate enough to interview Russian Ambassador Dmitry Polyatsky yesterday, and he said, basically said, in a nutshell, what he said is, we need formal talks. You know what I mean? None of this, basically, he didn't come out and say no, or, he didn't claim anything. But basically what he was saying is we need formal talks between people. He said, we've been waiting for Stefanik to get to New York so we can have formal meetings. She's not there. We can't meet with the underlings. You know how the Russians are. They're very bureaucratic. They go by the rules. Let's do some formal talks. Let's put something in writing. Well, it has been released today that there were formal talks. And your thoughts on them while you're doing, I'll bring up a little story and we can go over some of the things that they supposedly talked about.
Well, yeah, we've actually seen Trump now take action to appease some of Putin's demands. And what has he done? Number one, he turned over the chair of the Ukraine Defense Group, which used to be chaired by the United States. Mm-hmm. He took the United States out of that and gave it to the Brits. Here, you do this. Now that job means they're in charge of trying to round up support among 50 different countries, because it's not just NATO. It's other countries, may include Australia, New Zealand. So now the Brits are in charge of that. The United States washed its hands. Secondly, both Trump said it, then Michael Waltz said it on Sunday talk show, and then Pete Hegseth repeated it again today. Going forward, securing Ukraine is Europe's problem, not ours. And in fact, Hegseth's speech presentation today at this, I'm not sure which conference it was, but it was NATO related. He said very clearly, number one is going forward, the United States is not going to have any troops on the ground in Ukraine, that the responsibility for securing Ukraine, if there's a security guarantees, that's Europe. Europe, you've got to do it. And Europe, if you send any troops or do anything to secure Ukraine, it's not going to be as a NATO activity. So you can't come and claim Article 5 that we got to come fight for you. No. You're doing this on your own. You're securing your own neighborhood. Leave us out of this. And Ukraine is not getting into NATO, period. Then they announced, Trump comes out and announces, oh, yeah, we're going to do the negotiation. So this will be a test, current events knowledge for you. He says, the negotiating team is going to be comprised of Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, John Radcliffe, Central Intelligence Agency, Michael Waltz, National Security Advisor, and Steve Witkoff, Special Envoy.
Yeah.
Whose name is missing there, Garland? Whose name is not on that list?
Let's see, Trump.
How about
the envoy?
General Kellogg.
Kellogg ain't on there.
He ain't on there. Why would that be? Well, news has come out in the last 3 or 4 days that Kellogg's daughter was an NGO grifter making money off of killing Russian soldiers.
Yep.
And I bet you Putin said, Kellogg, non-starter. Dump him.
I did an entire, for those who don't know, I did a segment yesterday on that where I did a deep dive into Kellogg's daughter. She's she's the director of, it's like the RT Weatherman, this organization, and they claim to be bringing medications in and out. I think they're gun runners. They claim that they're taking, what do they call them? American volunteers, and they're repatriating their bodies. So anyway, in other words, to me, it sounds like they're doing mercenary work. Then she's involved in another one of these U.S. aid kind of for women, women in charge of national security, kind of one of those woke neocon, we're women standing for national security, all kind of money laundering. So his daughter is clearly that very swamp monster that people are trying to pull apart in U.S. aid. She is the embodiment of it.
Yeah.
And he's eating off of that, eating from that trough also.
Well, and I guarantee you that there's certainly CIA funding for one of those organizations that it was, there was a way to extract CIA contractors that had been sent into combat that got wounded without identifying them as CIA. So, but anyway, I looked at that list. Kellogg's nowhere on the list. And so Kellogg is supposed to be in Munich next week presenting Trump's peace plan. That peace plan is not getting presented next week, because Trump is talking to Putin. They're going to work a deal. And, the Europeans, I wish I had the underwear concession in Europe, because they're going to need to change a pair or two.
Let's see what we have. They say they talked for, this says it lasted an hour. It says President Trump spoke in favor of a speedy end to hostilities and a peaceful resolution to the problem. President Putin, for his part, stressed the need to, important, and the Russians said this all along, eliminate the root causes of the conflict, and agreed with Trump that a long-term settlement could be achieved through peace talks. Now, here's my question.
Yeah.
The root causes is NATO expansion, right?
Yeah.
And NATO expansion is because of this whole world. We got to run the world, and we got to take over Russia and weaken them, and we can go to China. The Ukraine project game, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do they get to the root of the problem, to NATO expansion, when you still got Keir Starmers and Macrons and these lunatics running around with, all talk but nothing to back it up?
No, well, that's what Heck said. He put a bullet in NATO's head today. Now, I don't know if they realize it, because when he said, hey, securing Ukraine has nothing to do with NATO, number one, and you, the Europeans, you got to foot the bill. You take care of this. Well, are they going to devote their money to securing Europe, or are they going to devote their money to securing NATO? And this is sort of, I think, a clever way of Trump to kill NATO. I think NATO's going to, I think NATO will fall apart over this, because all of a sudden Trump's walking away. He's leaving them holding that steaming bag of horse excrement. They're sitting there going, my God, what do we do with this? Go find a garden to put the fertilizer on, because it's over. I mean, this Ukraine, Zelensky, I think things are going to move pretty quick now with Trump and these guys delivering this message, because all of a sudden Zelensky's got no more protection.
Yeah.
And
And I tend to think that in the same way that USAID was a big scam and all of these things were big money laundering operations, NATO, and if you remember during COVID, it came out that Ursula von der Leyen, you remember von der Leyen, she had some big scam with Pfizer or somebody. She's getting under money under the table that she'd never talk about. I tend to think that the whole thing was a corruption scheme, and that, yeah, we're sending money into NATO. That money was being laundered, EU money. The whole thing was a giant
right,
money laundering operation. And maybe this, when Trump said you got to go up to 5%, here's what I thought. Well, he's got to know they ain't got it. If I say to you, you've got to give me something that I know you can't give me, I'm really saying I'm just going to end it.
yeah,
It's an easy way.
exactly. You're exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, I mean, this is forcing their hand. They want to play in the high stakes poker room. Then you better have the cash to get in there. You can't just walk in there with a pretty smile and a charming personality.
Yeah, at some point your luck's going to run out, and they're going to say, "Put money in my hand. If you ain't got the money, you're out of the game." Let me ask you this: one of the things that Ambassador Polyansky said yesterday, and I didn't think about this, but it is critical. Because when I said, I brought this up, I said, there's a history, whether it's the JCPOA or Minsk Accord and et cetera. One of the questions that's obviously going to be asked is, how do you ensure that any agreement that you made, stands the test of time, right? It is adhered to. But he brought up something. He said, well, I'm paraphrasing. Yeah, the issue of whether or not the U.S. goes along with it is okay, sure. But he also brought up the importance of the people in Kiev. You know what I mean? You have unstable, lunatic, Azov, but, guys goose stepping around with Hitler tattoos all over them that have this, the Banda rights. So that's the other side of it. You make a deal. A long time ago, I said that somebody was, they said the Russians want to denazify Ukraine. I said, well, hell, if we're going to get a deal, we're going to have to denazify them ourselves, because they'll never go. Your thoughts on the instability of that regime and the potential for civil war or collapse or something inside there once maybe Trump washes his hands, once the U.S. backs off and they're kind of on their own, they're dealing with the Brits who don't have a dime to give them. What about that unstable regime inside of Ukraine?
Well, I think that's going to be one of the issues on the negotiating table that Russia is going to press for, that there are going to be new elections in Ukraine, that the existing government has got to be voted out, that a new constitution has to be put in place, a constitution that will ensure the protection of all ethnic minorities, and that the exclusion from government and from participating in the political process of all Nazi organizations. Any organization that professes any kind of allegiance to Stefan Bandera or to Adolf Hitler will be prohibited from running. Now, some people might object to that. Well, that's not freedom. Well, you know what? I grant you, there are certain ideologies that have no place in polite company. And, that's what Russia's going to press for that. And as part of that they will be on the supervising committee, that there will be an international group. They may actually ask the Chinese, will participate, Saudis maybe, but that there'll be some folks with some clout, that it's not just going to be all tilted towards Europe and towards the West, and that they'll have a significant say to say, yeah, this is being implemented properly. They've been screwed enough over the last decade with a variety, Minsk 1, Minsk 2, Trump walking away from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement, INF, that the U.S. role, along with the Brits, of tanking a tentative peace agreement that had been worked out that would have saved the lives of, probably 700,000 Ukrainians and maybe 70, 80,000 Russians, that the West, to sabotage that. So they're not playing those games anymore. You want to negotiate, we're going to negotiate, but it's going to be serious. And part of that seriousness was, you got to go out in public and say they're not going to be in NATO anymore. That's what Pete Hegseth did today.
I think, again, the
You got to
importance
make
of
sure that NATO is not going to be involved anymore in our war.
Yeah. Again,
That's
the
what,
importance of Tulsi Gabbard giving
yeah,
Trump some honest information, giving these people, even the negotiators, if she's giving them, honest information. Let me ask you this. Just out of curiosity, I don't know if you can even answer this question. These postage stamp size states, the
mhm.
Latvias and the Lithuania, and we hate Russia. Oh, we're this. I mean, they're like the size of the neighborhood that I live in. But if
Yeah,
you listen to them, you would think that they're a world power just ready to take on the Russians and crush them, like a flea. And when this all said and done, where they go to, many of whom, might I add, can trace their political legacy right back to the same people as the Banderites. But where are they left? We hate the Russians. We're away from the Russians. We want nothing to do financially with the Russians. And when this thing falls apart, where do these lunatics end up?
yeah. I don't know. If you come to Florida, you'll see what I call the Florida dog. There are these nasty little things like the yappy. They're loud. They're annoying, but they're useless unless they're affectionate with you. That's Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Completely useless, completely irrelevant, hollering to get attention. And what fascinates me is I understand why they may have had some animus towards the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union's gone, and what Russia is today is not what the Soviets were. The society is open. It's predominantly Christian, but despite being a predominantly Christian nation, is openly accepting of all other religions. And they don't persecute the Muslims or the Hindus, they've got like 149 different ethnic groups to contend with. The stores are filled with consumer items. The cities are spotless. Paris used to be known as the City of Lights. No longer. It'd be Moscow. Moscow at Christmas is just spectacular. The lighting is such. So, it's a different place. And yet here's Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and most of Europe pretending like this is that Vladimir Putin is Stalin reborn. It's not true. And if anything, what Putin has done in Russia since 1999, they might call him a dictator, whatever. I wish we had a president in this country that could do for America what Putin's done for Russia, because it went from what is occurring inside our inner cities across, whether it's Baltimore or Philadelphia. And as a former police officer, and I don't know, do you ever watch the HBO series The Wire?
No, but it's supposed to be in Baltimore, and I live 10 minutes from Baltimore City line if I go in one direction. So yeah. I know Baltimore very well.
Oh yeah, and I did some work with a summer church camp once where we had kids from Pigtown. Where Pigtown is in Baltimore, and
know it well.
It's a mixed race place, and we had an 11-year-old boy at our camp whose mother had turned him out into the streets as a male prostitute at the age of 8.
Oh yeah,
and this is, so what I'm saying is we got nightmares going on in our cities where we've got kids. And particularly within the Black community in those inner cities that aren't being taught to read, aren't being taught to write, and raising them to give them no hope. And yet we're spending $1 trillion actually in Ukraine we've spent almost $500 billion. It's outrageous.
And apparently they don't know where it is now. They're like, it was 177 billion. We only got 100 billion. Come on, you expect us to believe? But I will guarantee you that a lot of that was stolen. Maybe they got 50. A whole hell of that was stolen before it got to Ukraine. It was redirected through black ops. They're like, where'd the weapons go? Some of them went to terrorist groups through.
Right.
There was the machine, yeah, there was stealing of it, but within this machine, there's people who are already set to utilize that for their own little specific project or mission around the world that they need money for. And all of that was going on.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, how does Hunter Biden get on the board of Burisma, along with former CIA officer Cofer Black? Now, Cofer used to have a pretty decent reputation, but man, once he signed on to that corruption project, please, you know, as you know, you're known by the company you keep.
Yeah, and Biden's buddy, the guy that's the Israel envoy right now, the guy
Steve.
No, Biden's guy with the good hair, with
Adam Hochstein.
Hochstein went over there. He resigned from the. Now, how crooked is this? They overthrow the country. This guy resigns from the Obama a State Department, and he signs on the same way that those guys did with Naftagaz, and he's getting paid. I mean, it was just they looted the country, what have you. Let me ask you to throw something else at you. I believe that there is an opportunity. I don't know how it happens. There's an opportunity also. You get in friend if you can get this deal with Russia, if you can get things going with Russia, to do something on the Korean Peninsula and get the hell out of Korea. And Trump said before, he says, "What are we doing with troops in Korea? It costs too much money." Blah, blah, blah. You know, he's very transactional. Clearly, my understanding is they're setting up a plan to get out of Iraq, Syria, stuff like that. I think there's maybe an opportunity on the Korean Peninsula to get some kind of a deal. What do you think?
Oh yeah, no. Listen, if Trump right now, he's looking through one of his famous plastic straws, and so he's seeing just a very narrow part of the picture. Vladimir Putin's he's got the kaleidoscope open, because he's saying, "Hey, this isn't about stopping a war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is a symptom. It's like having a smallpox pustule on your arm. It's a symptom of a deeper sickness. You got to treat the sickness. Sickness is this NATO expansion, and the saber rattling from NATO. That's got to stop. But within that, we can get a broader peace agreement that would affect not just Russia, but Iran, North and South Korea, and defuse China. Now, there's still several within the Trump camp that believe that they can forge a close relationship with Russia and split Russia off from China. Now, I think that's crazy. That's not going to happen. I think that this is not, Russia and China didn't agree on a one-night stand. They got married, and it was a blood marriage. It was more than just holding hands. So the world is changed since Donald Trump was first in office, and it may take him a month or two to get a grip and recognize, okay, this is the new world, and all my bluster and bullying and threatening ain't going to get it done. Because what I took hope from is, despite the disaster of a press conference he had yesterday with Prince Abdullah, or King Abdullah of Jordan, and the idiotic threats he was making with respect to the people of Gaza, is like they did all that damage to themselves. Are you kidding me? That part of the discussion with Putin that lasted over an hour and a half, our RT sources say, was the Middle East. And I'm sure Putin wasn't telling Donald Trump, "Oh yeah, that Riviera on the Gaza sounds great. Now, what can we do to get a piece of that?" No. Russia's got several, at least 1.5 million citizens in Israel, and they'd probably prefer to see them stay alive as opposed to die. But is also going to, be very direct with Trump about, if you go down that path, you're going to create a real problem for yourselves. And oh, by the way, we have a security arrangement with Iran.
Yeah. And notwithstanding the claims made by Israel, we've destroyed 90% of Iran's military, wiped out their ability to build this and that. My interpretation of their attack on Iran is far different than what they've claimed. Now, I
agree with you.
I'm going to bring up an article, and please try to make some sense of this to me. NATO boss issues warning to Putin. Mark Rutte said the U.S.-led military bloc would crush Russia like a flea, apparently, if the country
Yeah.
attacks member states. Now, I know, we all know. Russia, first of all, they're trying to get a peace deal right now.
Yeah.
Who are they going to attack? Latvia? You know what I mean? Really? The Russians go like horrified, they're going to attack. There's nobody they're looking for a fight with. What is the PR? Because clearly there's something behind this. What is the PR move behind in the midst? And not only that, right when they find, hey, Trump's talking to Putin, they're doing well, they want a deal, they're chummy. Hey, how you doing, old buddy, old pal? Yeah, we can get a deal. Screw these idiots over here. And then this guy comes out, we'll crush Putin like a flea. It seems like there's something behind that. You know what I mean, Larry?
Well, they're trying to make themselves relevant to this process, but it's been fascinating watching Putin's approach through all of this. Do you remember? I think now it was 2 years ago when the Africa delegation showed up in Moscow and we're pushing, hey, we want you to really work on working out a peace deal. And that's where Putin pulled out and said, hey, here's the deal we had. Here's our initials. Here. And the African delegation were like, oh, okay. It's clear that you tried and you were shut down. But Putin throughout this process is wanting to make sure that he's not going to take steps that would alienate the countries in the global south, that he's going to maintain their support. The same with China. So that for that reason alone, he's not going to go attack Europe, and it has shown little inclination to do it. But the Europeans, though, they need that Russian threat in order to justify the massive amounts of money being poured into the military-industrial complex. That's all is. I'm sure you've had some dealings in Hollywood, and out there, all they care about is who's the villain. Got to have a villain, and so that you can play the main character off against the villain and drive the story forward. That's all Russia's there for right now, apart from the fact that Europe desperately needs all of Russia's resources, which Russia's happy to sell it to them, but Europe's not willing to play by those rules.
They're going to be in a mel of a hess. My dad would always
say.
That.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They're going to be in a mel of a hess when this ends, because one of the things is, look, let's face it, in a couple of weeks, Germany's got elections. The people in Europe, just like every other person who gets up and goes to work, says, I want inexpensive gas. I want, to be able to afford to feed my family. And they're going to be voting and moving in this way. And here's the problem they're going to have. For all of the evil Russian rhetoric, the Russians are going to say, all right, we'll sell you this stuff again. And what do? No, you're too evil. We can't buy it. Even though the Ukraine conflict is over, even though there's a lot, you're just too evil. They're going to have a mess to deal with this morass of, lies that they've sunk themselves into.
Yeah. What? They don't have anything to give Ukraine. You remember about 3 months ago, France tried to train a brigade, 2,000 guys. So it was really half a brigade. And as soon as they got back to Ukraine, they defected. So all that money that was spent down the toilet. This is... what's happened within the last 24 hours, because this is all connected. The release of that Michael Fogel is his name. The guy got caught with cannabis in Russia. And I don't know about you. I think it's sort of hilarious and ironic that on the one hand, here's Trump celebrating the release of a guy who got arrested for having too much cannabis in Russia. Meanwhile, we're locking up people's asses in certain states in this country for what? Having too much cannabis. Are we going to free? Maybe we should free them.
Exactly. The contradiction we got here.
It's just the hypocrisy on this is staggering. But and they're celebrating. They're claiming this guy was like a hostage release. Dude, break the law. Pay the fine.
You knew it was illegal. If somebody is in a state where weed is legal and they have it, and they're going to another state, they know good and well when they cross the border to that other state, it's illegal. If they get caught with it, it's their own stupidity. Even though it was legal when it was in their state, they knew I'm going into state X or anything that's legal, or you're going into state X, it ain't legal. And you put yourself in that position, you got to pay, you got to pay the price. Last thing. It seems to me that Middle East, well, I've got a couple more minutes. Things are real incoherent. What's happening with Bibi? It seems like Trump doesn't have a plan, doesn't have a strategy, and he stumbles from day to day on something, to be quite frank, that could be handled a lot differently if he was, here's the difference, if he was as authoritative there as he is maybe in Europe, where he says, this is what we're going to do and this is what we're not going to do, but for numerous reasons, money and other things, and the Adelson family and stuff like that. But anyway, your thoughts on the policy in the Middle East?
I don't know where he got this Gaza on the Riviera. Well, I know where he got it from his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. The insensitivity, the callousness of Trump.
Uh-oh. Larry just froze. Are you there, Larry?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there we go. Back. As soon as we started talking about Israel, boy, well, we're good. We talk about Israel. That's when you freeze.
But he pretended that the Palestinians destroyed that place on their own. No, we did that. We armed the Israelis, and the Israelis bombed and killed civilians. So his efforts to try to bully both Jordan, King Abdullah, and then Sisi, General Sisi of Egypt, into giving up land and forcibly relocating the Palestinians. Well, it's not even a plan, because he ain't putting up any money, and he's not putting any troops on the ground. So, you're going to have a magic transporter show up. News came out today, El-Sisi announcing he's convening an emergency meeting of the Organization of Islamic Countries, the OIC. And they're going to meet to basically issue a joint statement on the Palestinian situation. Now, I do key in on one thing Trump said. Okay, well, what plan do you? Let's see what Egypt's plan is. So maybe Trump was saying something this extreme to force the Arab countries to come up with a viable plan that they're going to pay for, that they'll take responsibility for rebuilding Gaza, that they'll foot the bill, and that if they do that, then maybe he'll back out from Israel. The danger is he's set this arbitrary Saturday deadline, and up to this point we've had about 7-8 weeks of peace, relative peace. The Houthis stopped firing, Hezbollah stopped firing. Everybody's kept their powder dry. If they follow through on this, and the Israelis appear eager to do so, at least temporarily, then we can see the war reignite. The Red Sea will get shut down. Trump's going to feel compelled to try to respond militarily, and he's going to find out we don't have the punch that we once thought we did. Because
it could affect other things. It could affect what he's doing with Putin, because let's face it, with the Russians, because they've got allies in the region. And then you've got the issue of OPEC that are allies with Russia. So, these things are inextricably linked. And okay, he cleaned it up per se, just at least briefly before he walked in. So when he walked in, people were in the streets screaming genocide all over the world, flying Palestinian flags, going bananas, right?
Right.
He cleaned that up, and he walked in with a clean slate. If they start shooting again, it's his.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
There are a lot of MAGA people that are okay, whatever Israel wants, but there's a lot of MAGA people and a lot of libertarians, especially, who commended him for that, and who would be really pissed, and they would feel as though that they have been backstabbed if he were to, because he said, what did he say? Things like, I'm going to be judged by the peace that I bring and the wars that I stop and all that kind of stuff. He set a standard for himself. I'm going to be the peacemaker. Personally, I'm like, well, I'll believe it when I see it, but it's refreshing to hear that. I'm going to give you credit for saying that. So good. Setting the standard for himself. If they start shooting and everything goes to hell, he's already said, judge me by that. It's his right now.
Yeah, I fully agree. You're 100% correct. And, you know, he's at a crossroads. He'll be a historic president one way or the other. Historic in bringing about peace, or historic in being just proven to be a buffoon.
Yeah, you know, as I said back in the day, you know, I'm a more lefty kind of guy. I was a big Bernie supporter. You know, hate the Democrats. But at the time Bernie was running, he was a populist. He was saying things that other people weren't saying. And I said, hey, okay, I'll vote for this guy. And of course, needless to say, the Democratic Party being the corrupt neocon, cesspool that it is, they trashed him. And then Bernie turned his back. Okay, fine. But there are a lot of people, if you watch a Glenn Greenwald or a Jimmy Dore or different people who you may agree with them sometimes and not, but they're people of integrity who say, I'm going to look at the facts. If Trump does something that I support, I'm going to say, yay, great job. If he does something that I don't support, I'm going to say, boy, I'm opposed to that and I'm going to fight it. As Frederick Douglass said, I'll join any man in the pursuit of evil, and of good, and I'll support, and I'll push back against anyone in support of evil. To me, that's the way politics have to be.
Yeah.
So I've said for a while, let me tell you something. If Trump comes in and he cleans up the mess in Gaza and Ukraine, you might see me running around with a red hat. I mean, I'm being facetious, but I'm going to have to give the man his due. Yeah. If he does that, you got to say that's one hell of a job as a president. So he's on that edge right now, and Netanyahu ain't his friend. Yeah. And if they get that started back, that is and not only that, here's the other part. These Democrats who are all for bombing everything, they'll do a 180 and they will turn on him. And now he's going to have the libertarians are going to turn on him and say, hey, you betrayed us. We supported you. The Democrats, they stand for nothing. They'll do a 180 and all of a sudden they'll be running around with Palestinian signs on. You know what I'm saying? He'll set himself up, man, to run into a buzzsaw if he doesn't clean this thing up by the weekend.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is. It's an unforced error. Again, maybe his goal all along was to say something so crazy that would provoke the Arabs into pushing back with their own plan, and then he can say, "Hey, okay."
Oh, geez, we keep losing. We'll see if Larry comes back. He keeps freezing. I don't know if you can hear us. Oh, there you go. There you go, Larry. You freeze every now and then.
Yeah, there's temporarily starting and stopping here.
Yeah. But at any rate, that's an hour, man. And I certainly appreciate taking an hour out. And we had a lot of important stuff. And I think I learned a lot. And it was a great conversation. I appreciate it. And I hope to, get you on again another week or so. Let me ask you this. Can you let everybody know where they can find all your good works and all the stuff you're doing, where they can follow you?
Come to sonar21.com. Sonar21.com.
And before we go, there we go. I always like to do this when people have a website. For anybody who has any question about good old Sonar 21, what it's going to look like, voila, Sonar 21. You see Larry's articles, all the things he's doing. You got the latest stuff he's doing up here. You got all about Larry. You can subscribe. And of course, very important, you got lots of various ways that you can support Larry to keep him, to be put him in a position to continue to do the work he's doing. Everybody's got to eat. Everybody's got to support themselves and keep things going. Thanks a lot, Larry. Certainly appreciate it. Everyone, thanks a lot. Don't forget, follow Larry. Share this on all your social media platforms, especially X, as you know. Mysteriously, just so everybody will know, if you look on X, you will see Garland Nixon. You will notice there's a blue check mark beside it, implying that is Garland Nixon. But Twitter, for some reason, X can't figure out who owns that account. They keep charging me for it, but they don't know who owns it. Isn't that interesting there?
Oh, boy.
That's free speech for you. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks a lot, everybody. Share this. Share this. Smash that like button. We're out.